Finding and discovering commands. Hey, here's this great new command line shell. What can you do with it? Well, that's what this nugget is going to help you figure out, how to find and teach yourself how to use all of the commands that come with Windows PowerShell. Here's how we'll tackle this topic. I'm going to start by showing you how to import modules and snap-ins into the shell. Modules and snap-ins are how the shell extends itself and adds functionality. Once you've got that taken care of, I'll show you how to search for individual commands that will perform whatever task it is you're trying to complete. And because sometimes I know you're going to wind up on a search engine trying to figure this stuff out, I'm also going to show you a really cool tip using the commandlet keyword. So a commandlet is PowerShell's word for a native command, something that is built into PowerShell or can be added into PowerShell and runs only inside of PowerShell. And there's a couple of cool things you can do with that keyword. Our journey begins here in Windows 7, where we will open Windows PowerShell, making sure that the title bar says Administrator. Okay, there are two different ways that you can extend the shell. The first way is called snap-ins. This was introduced in PowerShell version 1. It still works in all the other versions of PowerShell that are out there, but extension authors aren't supposed to use this anymore. I'm going to still show you how to use it. It might not be interesting because there was never a massive commitment made to this approach. You start by running get ps snap-in, and I'm going to use tab completion to complete that command name. And I'm going to ask for a list of registered snap-ins. You'll notice that I used tab completion again there. All right, I don't have any registered snap-ins. Not actually surprising. There's not like I said, this wasn't a heavily invested thing. Servers are more likely to have snap-ins if it's like an Exchange server or something like that. Exchange 2007 bundled its extensions as a snap-in. If you did have a snap-in, you would use add ps snap-in, provide the name of the snap-in, and that would load it into memory. Okay. Next step is the new way, which was introduced in PowerShell version 2. Let's do a get module minus list available. Okay, that's not bad. Keep in mind, I am on a Windows 7 computer. One of the features of Windows 7 is that it doesn't have a lot of PowerShell capability. But I do have some modules here that I can play with. Once I see what's available, import module name troubleshooting pack. And you got to type that out. Let's hit enter. That's going to load it into memory. Okay, so now regardless of how you have your extension packaged, if it's a snap-in or a module, you know how to list the ones that are installed on this computer and how to load one into memory. You have to do that every single time the shell starts. Now there is something called a profile script that can do it for you. We will cover that in a later nugget. But every single new PowerShell window requires that you redo this process. In fact, if I came down here and opened up a new PowerShell window and I ran get module just to see what was loaded, nothing. So this is a per process, per window basis type thing. Once you get your snap-in or module loaded, get command, module, and then provide the name of the module or the name of the snap-in. Troubleshooting pack. That lists the commands that are in this thing. So once those are there, I can start reading help, and that's what we're going to cover in the next nugget and learn how to use these. Once a module is loaded into memory, it also makes all of its commands discoverable to command search. And you do that using get command. And the neat thing with get command is that it can accept wildcards. So let's say I just did pack. You'll notice that in addition to commandlets, which are the native PowerShell commands, these only run inside of PowerShell. So here's my get troubleshooting pack, and there's the commandlet invoke troubleshooting pack. It's also going outside the shell and looking at applications. So these are external executables and DLLs. We can limit that a little bit by specifying a command type of either commandlet or function. Those are the two things that would exist entirely within PowerShell. And that gets me back to just those two. You can use this technique for anything. So, what if I wanted to get something out of an event log? I'm going to use log between asterisks, and I'll get everything that contains the word log. Now look, this isn't a Google search, right? Folks will say, well, how can I provide multiple criteria? How can I say I want everything that contains log and EV? You can't. This is just a very, very straightforward string pattern match. It's not an indexed search operation with multiple keywords. However, take a look at some of these command names. You'll notice that PowerShell commands have a pretty consistent naming convention. Clear event log, get event log, limit event log, new event log. Let's look at a different example. Let's try and grab things with services. Get service, new service, restart service, set service. So the naming convention for these commands is called verb noun. Every command name starts with a verb. Clear, get. Well, I get that new is not really a verb, but get over it. Just pretend it's a verb. After the verb, there's always a dash, and then there's a singular noun, and that's kind of an important bit. It's not get services, it's get service. Even though I presume it would get more than one service, it's actually always a singular noun. So that means when you do your little searching, you don't want to search for logs because you won't find anything. What you'll find is log. And you don't want to search for services, you want to search for service. I actually left the E off when I searched for it because I'm just doing a string pattern match here. So once you've got extensions loaded into memory, you can start doing this type of thing. And you can even get a little better. Give me all the services that use the noun get and all the commands that use the noun get. And, oops, I've got that backwards. The verb get and the noun, I can use wildcards here too. So just let's do SERV. See, that limits my list even more. Now these verbs that are used here are kind of managed by Microsoft. There's a list of verbs that commandlet authors are supposed to be using, and so long as the authors stick with that list, then it'll make it easier for you to guess. I mean, for example, you've already seen just two examples here. Actually three. Get troubleshooting pack, get event log, and get service. If I asked you to find the command that could retrieve a list of running processes, what do you think the verb would be? Probably get, because it's always get. And you see that consistency, and the fact that there's a limited set of verbs that people are supposed to use makes it easier for you to guess. So if I did this, let's just follow through. Get process. Okay, given that there's a get process, what if I wanted to terminate a process, to kill the process? Looking up here at my list of service commands, I see that there is a stop service, and that tells me that the verb stop is a legal verb. Okay. Can I do a verb stop and a noun proc? Oops, got to spell it right. Very important. Stop process. I could even just ask for the verb. Show me everything that PowerShell knows how to stop. A computer, a job, a process, a service, and a transcript. So this ability to search through these commands this way is really a key part of the operation. You know, here's the thing. Let's just launch anything. When you've got a graphical user interface, and think about maybe the first time, in fact, let's do this. I want to think about it. Think about the first time you launched Active Directory users and computers. Close your eyes, go back to your happy place, go back in time. The first time you opened ADUC, what did you do? Well, like any other GUI, you probably right-clicked things to see what popped up. You probably looked for the toolbar. You probably went through the menus to see what was there. Those features, things like tooltips that you can hover over and right-clicking and menus, those are called discoverability features. They let you discover what you can do with the product, and they let you do it in a non-destructive way. Well, PowerShell doesn't have a menu. PowerShell doesn't have tooltips. PowerShell just has text. But it does have discoverability features, and get command is right at the head of the pack. Get command is how you find what it is this product can do for you. Now the downside is get command can only work on things that have been loaded into memory. So you're going to have to use other discoverability features. I'm going to hit up arrow here to recall a previous command. I wanted to get module list available. You're going to have to run these commands to see what's on this computer. You're going to have to run that command on other computers to see what's on those computers. So by discovering what's there, you'll start to build up an image of what you can do in your head. And once you've got that image in your head, you'll be able to start planning out how you're going to use the shell. Now I'm going to switch over to Windows 8 to show you how this works in PowerShell 3, because it's actually 31 flavors of awesome. The biggest downside in version 2 was that before get command could find things for you, you had to explicitly load the module or the snap-in into memory. Now everything I just showed you in version 2 still works here in version 3, but let's take a look at the modules that are available first of all. Now again, the modules are not necessarily part of version 3. These are a feature of the operating system I'm on. So just because you install version 3 on Windows 7 does not mean you're going to get all these modules. These modules are a feature of Windows 8. And there's a lot of them. Look at all this stuff. This is just the M's and on. You go all the way back up here and I've got tons of stuff. Now I've installed the Remote Server Administration Toolkit for Windows 8. There's an RSAT for Windows 7 as well. And some of these, like the Active Directory module and the Best Practices module, those are installed as part of the RSAT. So in addition to having to have the right version of Windows, you have to have that additional set of components installed. The RSAT's the same thing that gives you the graphical server tools like these things. It's what gives me Active Directory users and computers here on my client. Okay, so those are all there. Let's see what's actually loaded in memory right now. Just a couple core PowerShell modules. Okay, great. So that means if I did get command and I asked for help with, I need to find things that have the word computer in their noun. I not only get things like add computer, which is in the Microsoft.PowerShell.management module, which is loaded. I'm also getting stuff from the Active Directory module, which is not loaded. So a feature of PowerShell version 3 is that when you search for commands using get command, it not only searches the modules that are loaded into memory, but it also searches the modules that are sitting on disk and have not been loaded into memory. How does it know where to find them? Well, there is an environment variable, and I'm just going to use a little shortcut to get to it, called PS module path. This is where PowerShell looks, and you can see that it has one location set to go in my documents folder, and these are any modules that I might have created and installed for just my own use. And it also looks here, which is where Microsoft suggests that operating system level modules be installed. Now let's say I installed some other tools here. They might add to this path so that PowerShell knows where to find their modules as well. So every single time you're running get command, it's not only looking at the commands that are actually in memory at the time, but it's also looking at the commands that are on disk. That makes discoverability easier. It means that as I start out, show me, let's see, let's do verb get noun. Show me everything that starts with the word net. I got a lot of net IP stuff, net IPv4. I've got some net LBFO stuff. I've got some net transition stuff. All these different modules, even though none of them are loaded, are searchable by get command. And you'll see that some of them are functions. Let's scroll up a bit. In fact, all of these are functions. So you're going to see two different types of things, functions and commandlets most commonly. What if I want to run these? For example, let's see. We've got this net adapter. Let's just run get net adapter. Let's run get module first. I want to point out that the net adapter module is not loaded. The command is not in memory. I'm going to hit tab completion to prove that even though the command isn't in memory, I can still tab complete its name. That makes it even easier for me to type the command name. I'll hit enter. There's a brief pause, and then it ran. Now if I run get module, you'll see that net adapter, it's actually got a couple of things loaded. So this is called implicit module loading. PowerShell knows that the command exists even though it's not in memory. If you try to run a command that exists but isn't in memory, PowerShell will automatically load that module for you so that it's in memory. That means if you've got a locally installed module, you don't ever need to explicitly load it just to run some of its commands. And that's really nice because that makes all of this much, much more discoverable. Makes it easier because you don't have to worry about, look, Windows 7 had like, what, 5 modules? Windows 8 has got a bazillion. If I had to go through all these and say, okay, I need to do some particular task, first I have to figure out which of these modules I think the command might be in. You don't have to do that. You don't have to worry about the modules anymore. Get command. Just show me everything that has something to do with printing. Oh, look, it turns out there's a print management module, and here's a bunch of commands in here. There's something in the failover cluster module, add cluster print server role. PowerShell core has got some stuff. And because I did not limit myself to just commandlets and functions, there's also all these external executables that I might want to play with. So discoverability gets even easier in PowerShell version 3 because it's going to look at what's installed without you explicitly having to load it. Now there are some caveats around this. Modules have to be in one of the locations where PowerShell knows where they are. If you want to modify, you know what, here's another trick. F7 pops up all the commands you've been running. If you hit enter on this menu, it'll run the command. If you hit right arrow, it'll put it there but not run it. Ha! So PowerShell has to have the modules in one of these paths. Now note, if I change this path from inside this window, it's only going to affect it for this window. If you need to change the environment variable permanently, then you go outside of PowerShell and you either configure it in a group policy object, which is what I recommend, or you can modify it as part of this computer's properties. That makes a permanent change for any new processes that begin after the point where you made the change. It won't update any processes that are already running. So the modules have to be here. This auto discovery and auto loading does not work with snap-ins. It only works with modules. I don't even know if I've got any snap-ins on this machine. No, I didn't think so. Again, sometimes you'll run across them on servers. There are things that are packaged as snap-ins, but most things are going to be in modules nowadays. I want to point out something else too. Let's go back. Let's see. Let's do that one where we looked for things that had the word net. That had a variety of stuff. Yeah. Notice how the command naming syntax or convention has evolved a little bit. What we tend to see now is, aside from the core PowerShell commands, and aside from the Exchange Server commands, because they shipped those before they actually thought of this, you'll notice that they're still using the verbs, but the nouns will always have some sort of prefix on them. Net adapter. Everything in the net adapter module, the noun starts with net adapter. That's just designed to make it a little bit easier for you to work with. For example, get command, show me all the ones where the noun starts with net adapt. Now I can quickly pull all those things up because it's a convention, and when I'm running them, it's visually easy to tell, hey, this has something to do with the net adapter. We're talking about the net adapter advanced property, not an advanced property of some other thing. We're talking about restarting the net adapter. We're talking about the net adapter binding, not a website binding, not binding your shoes. So that net adapter prefix helps further communicate exactly what it is that command does. I should point out that some of these command names, I'm looking at you, get net adapter encapsulated packet task offload, are really long. And that bugs some folks. Look, tab completion, dude. Get net adapt. There it is. So the tab completion will complete whatever you've typed to that point. Look what I did there. I did get net a tab to get me net adapter. Then I added an E, and that got me the whole command. You'll also see commands in PowerShell shortened into aliases. Dir. Dir is actually an alias to a command called get child item. See the same results there? So you can create these aliases on your own as well, and that's something we'll talk about coming up in a bit. You can create these aliases, and it helps make it just a little easier to refer to commands that have a really long command name. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of aliases. I mean, PWD, if you know what that means, it's great, but for someone coming in who doesn't know what that means, it's a little hard to mentally unwind what that's supposed to be doing. I would rather type get location, because if someone looks at the command name get location, it's a little clearer what's going on. So just something you can bear in mind as you're working with all this stuff. Now I promised to show you a trick, and here it is. Let's pop open IE here and see if it'll connect to the intertubes. There we go. So you've already learned that the word commandlet means a built-in PowerShell, not built-in, but native PowerShell command. The interesting thing is that word, CMDLET, didn't exist before PowerShell. Microsoft actually made up a brand new word. Now, why would they make up a word? Do we not have enough words? Because this offers search result optimization. The word commandlet only means something in combination with PowerShell. So if you add the word commandlet to your search engine search, you're going to do a much better job of limiting the results down to just those things that have to do with a PowerShell command. If I just typed process list, I'd get all kinds of crazy stuff. By adding the word commandlet, pretty much everything on here is having to do with PowerShell, including using the commandlet, an overview of the commandlet. This is probably the online documentation for the commandlet. So it's just a neat little trick that you can use to kind of narrow down your results very, very quickly and make sure that the results you're getting in a search engine are those that have to do with just PowerShell. Now, I suppose this leaves us with the big question of where do I get the modules? Back here in PowerShell version 2 on my Windows 7 computer, if I run a get module list available, I don't have an Active Directory module. I don't have very many modules at all. So where would I get them? Well, the answer is easy. It depends. Here's the easy way to think about it. Wherever you would go to get the graphical management tools, the graphical consoles for a technology, that will usually install the PowerShell modules as well. So the Active Directory module comes with the Active Directory Users and Computers console, which is part of the Remote Server Administration Toolkit, or RSAT. So you would download and install the RSAT on your client computer. If you want the Exchange server commandlets, I'm guessing you would take the Exchange DVD and do an admin tools installation on your client computer. In some cases, as you'll learn later on when we talk about remoting, you can actually consume PowerShell modules from the server where they're installed. But if you want all the module functionality available on your client computer, and you absolutely should want that, you should not be managing on the server, you should be managing from your client, then you're going to have to go get the admin tools and install them on your client computer, and then PowerShell will have access to them. So now you know how to extend the shell. I've shown you how to import modules and snap-ins, and I've shown you some of the tricks and techniques that differ between the different versions of Windows PowerShell. I've also shown you how to search for commands and start finding the command that you need. And I showed you what I think is a very cool tip using the commandlet keyword. The idea that that keyword only means something to PowerShell and that you can use it for search result optimization is just awesome. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.